my dear Sitecore family. So this is our first ever standing podcast today, and we have Meenakshi with us, Meenakshi Gour. Hi Meenakshi.
Yeah.
So Meenakshi is a senior DX engineer here at Horizontal, and she has been working here for 6 years. And recently she, just finished off one of her projects, which is on XM Cloud. It went on for more than 1 year or so, right?
Yeah.
So she's here to share her learnings on things where, as developers, when we are getting started on XM Cloud projects, what all things we need to take care about. Well, Meenakshi, today we will mainly talk about components, right? The basics of components, configurations, development, all these things of components on XM Cloud. But first, thank you for your time and thank you for being on Sitecore Tech Talks. And well, we can now get started on this.
Thank you, Varun, for having me on your podcast again. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So when I talk of components on XM Cloud, and I would like to compare it somewhere with XP, so that the developers who are already on Sitecore XP can understand it better. How do I really look at them in a comparative way? Because like if I talk of the traditional ways of MVC, then of course we have headless components as well. How is the development mechanism with XM Cloud, and how do we really get started for any developer?
Okay, so when we say we start, the first thing comes in mind, like I have an MVC side, will I be able to move everything to my XM Cloud? I guess then we can say no, you cannot directly move your everything, or there is no way that you can convert everything to your XM Cloud. In XM Cloud, to move it to XM Cloud, you have to have headless. You have to go headless first, and then you can move it to XM Cloud, because the XM Cloud, when we are moving, we wanted to have everything fast. We wanted to go on Vercel Edge, where we will be using the latest framework, Vercel, React and everything. So when we go with these frameworks, we have to convert our data in format of JSON. In MVC, we will have our view renderings, controller renderings, which we cannot directly convert. We need to have our JSON rendering. So when we start with the XM Cloud, the first thing would be we have all the renderings will have as JSON rendering.
Okay, so no MVC kind of renderings can directly be moved to XM Cloud.
Yeah, correct.
So no controller renderings, no view renderings, only JSON renderings.
Yes.
Okay, what if I have a website which is headless on XPs? Is the migration smoother or faster?
Absolutely, it would be faster compared to the basic MVC one, because you already have the headless thing in your solution.
And of course, if I am having an MVC kind of a solution and I'm moving it to XM Cloud,
headless first.
Yeah, I need to move. So basically, need to develop all the components in a headless paradigm and then get it out there.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk of headless components in that case. You mentioned JSON renderings. So that is the only type of rendering available?
No, renderings and everything will be available. But the thing is, when you're moving, you wanted to use the latest technology or the latest technology stack. And that's why you have to use the JSON one. You will still have all these renderings in your picture, but because whenever we switch to technology, we wanted to maximize the out of the box things, so that the upgrades and everything would be smoother, and that's why we are more inclined to use JSON rendering in terms of using the XM Cloud things.
Sure.
And the component, we mentioned how we can go with the components. So there could be multiple ways in how you wanted to develop your XM Cloud. The first thing, you have to structure your component, that what you wanted, like how you wanted to build your component. So basically there would be two ways. Like you wanted to go via layout service. What is layout service? It is like your headless service, which will give you the item information, the layout information in terms of JSON. That JSON you can use in your modern frameworks.
So the JSS that we say, that is Technically, you know, the foundation of JSS provides us layout service kind of
Correct.
structure.
Yep.
So it's a JSON structure basically.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Then?
in layout, you'll get everything in JSON format, and then the different another approach would be using the GraphQL way. And GraphQL is language where you can write in terms of queries.
Yeah.
When you write in queries, basically when we go headless or everything would be your APIs, but there would be an endpoint, and from that endpoint you will be getting the data. So GraphQL would be your edge or your CM server where you will be querying the data. And while querying, you will have the language, GraphQL language, and which you will write queries and you will get the output. So now you have to decide between whether you wanted to go the layout way or GraphQL way.
So whether I say layout service or GraphQL, technically the data that is returned to me is JSON for sure.
Yeah.
Is that a correct assumption?
Correct.
Okay. So then, when do I choose, or how do I choose whether it should be layout service or GraphQL?
So let's take an example. If you have a page type or the data source type of thing in your component. So in your component, if you have a basic promo thing where you will have a title and description and image kind of thing.
Yeah.
In that component, you can directly go in layout service, because everything in your layout would be returned. You will have placeholder. Every placeholder detail would be written in the layout service. You will get item name, template ID, template everything, and the fields. In that fields, you will get the data, and your front end can use all those data and can render it. Okay. While going GraphQL way, when your data is a bit complex, or you want to have some manipulation on the data, like you are not getting that data directly. If you wanted to have childrens of that, you wanted to have specific children, then you have to go via the GraphQL way.
Okay, sure, understandable. So basically, you just have a single item, you go the data source route, the layout service route. When you have maybe a structure of items involved, you go a GraphQL route. Okay. As a simple explanation. So from an example standpoint, you mentioned promo to be a part of layout. So can I say like components like header, footer, where we have to kind of create a structure, and one item generally proves to be a data source, right? So in such cases, header, footer are good to be utilized via GraphQL.
Correct. We can use. Again, that would be debatable whether you wanted to go GraphQL. If your header structure is quite simple, that you will have some links and then that links would be displayed. But if your header is complex, like you wanted to, so primary navigation, then utility, under that you'll have children, under that you have multiple columns. In that case, it's good to go via GraphQL.
Okay. Well, let's elaborate the layout service specific components a little bit more. So when I'm building components using layout service, how do I get started and what do I really look at? I mean, of course, there are two types of components, one being the page type and one being the data source type. So firstly, let's only focus on the data source type components, because I think they cover majority of the chunk of components that we create. So if I'm creating a data source component using layout service, what is the procedure as a backend developer I need to take care, and as a front end developer as well? So if both the things, if you can just.
So when you go layout, there is term called content resolver, from where your content would be resolved. So when you are working, you like in your page or your data source, anything, you will have some fields. So that fields would be rendered via layout service, and layout would where you can tell your front end that this is how the data structure look like, and they'll define their structure accordingly, and they can use the data from there. But there are requirements that I wanted to use the layout service, but I don't want it to go, like my data is not that much complex that I should use the GraphQL. For example, I wanted to use data source. I wanted to use data source and its children. So there are different content resolvers available out of the box. Some of the content resolvers are like item resolver, that would be your default. your data source resolver, data source and children resolver, your form resolver. So there are multiple resolvers available, and according to how you wanted to expose your data, you can select the content resolver and your data would be exposed to your layout service.
So can I say content resolver is something like a pipeline inside Core and just fetches those particular group of data based on what item is provided to it in data source, and kind of formulates and gives out JSON.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a few content resolvers are available by default in Sitecore. So whether I go to XM Cloud and create a new JSON component, I need to select a content resolver in that component.
If you don't select that, it will by defaultly take as item resolver as your default. So even if you do not select anything from that particular field, it will have it will render your data according to the item itself.
Okay. So it's not mandatory for me to select.
Yeah.
I can select one only if I need a little change in the response that I am looking for from the component.
Yep.
Right? Can I create a custom content resolver?
Yes, we can create. Again, if you see like most of the component in your site would be like this, and you wanted to manipulate data in some specific format, because when you go via layout service, what happens is, for example, you will have 20 fields in your template, and when you expose to the layout service, those 20 fields will be rendered in your layout. But what if your component is using only 5, rest of 5 or 10 are for different purposes? In that case, that 20 would be rendered, that would not be used, and it will increase your page size, and it will ultimately somehow your performance would be impacted.
Yep.
So in that case, if you wanted to have, like I wanted to have a resolver which will specifically choose this fields and manipulate this and accordingly work this, you can have your custom resolver where you will basically write code in your Visual Studio, and accordingly it will give you the data.
Cool. So which means I can still be a very strong backend developer and
of course
cite content resolvers. Like I know it's headless, it's moving more towards advanced JavaScript frameworks and all, but still these things are...
There is still scope for the backend developers.
All right. Sure. Well, let's move towards the GraphQL now.
Okay.
So sorry, I'll just come back. So basically we create a JSON rendering. If we have a specific format required, then we select a content resolver. Otherwise we keep it as is, and so there of course there will be situations where we will require only a specific template to be used, so we have the same fields of data source, template and location available to be selected, like previously we used to do that, right? So that content authors can select only a specific type of component data source and only from a specific location. So we used to set those data source locations and data source templates.
I can give you an example, like you can understand it. So for example, we are using footer. In footer, what we'll have, we have social links, we have copyright text and the year and the some, if you wanted to have some text. So we'll have title, copyright text, and then the list. And previously what we'll do is we'll read somewhere the social links would be created, we'll read the children and everything, and then the item from where we can get the copyright text and everything will display in our site. So if we wanted to go out of the box with the layout service and we don't want it to, it would be like once you start working on it, you'll realize how I wanted to tweak my data or how I wanted to structure my templates. So you will create a template in which you will have your title, your description, your copyright text, and then you'll create a multi-list. In that multi-list, you will select what social media icons the links you wanted to display. In that case, your entire thing would come into one template, and that would be you can use your layout service where your item would be resolved or your data source would be resolved. Perfect. So this way we can use most of the out of the box things and we can use our data.
Right. In this case, it could be data source with children as a resolver if the social icons are kind of below that item.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
So that can be done. And but then previously we used to have those fields of data source location and data source template, so that the content authors are not confused whether I can select
That
this
is
item.
again
All those are
same.
there.
Everything is same. You
Right.
have to select, and a content author will have everything same. The experience would be same for content authors.
Awesome. Well, now we can move towards the GraphQL kind of components. So you mentioned that we can filter out data. Basically, of course, that is what GraphQL is. You can, instead of having all the fields, you can filter out some data and only present those data in form of JSON. So what is the procedure of creating a component which uses GraphQL?
So when you go via GraphQL way, there could be two ways again you can use. So when you create a JSON rendering, inside that rendering itself you'll have a field called the GraphQL. Inside that you can write your query. And in that query also there are some tokens out of the box available. That is your data source, your context item, your language. Everything is like earlier we used to have token like $date. If you write $name, you'll get everything. So here also we have tokens $data source, $context item, $language, and in that you'll everything would be resolved for you.
Cool.
You'll get that. You'll write your query inside that. So in our previous example we discussed that we wanted to use out of 20 fields we wanted to use 5, so we'll just write those 5 fields inside that GraphQL and it would render that particular 5 fields for you, and you can use that. That would be you called it as integrated GraphQL, where your everything would be written inside your rendering itself. So for example, tomorrow you wanted to add one more field inside that, so you don't have to add anywhere in the code and you just have to write in your GraphQL. Again, your code would be written accordingly. If you wanted to display purpose, then it would be fine. Otherwise you will have some code changes in your front end and you will be able to expose your fields or you can use in your site.
Right. So well, in case I write the GraphQL queries inside, so I'm talking of a situation, okay, where I have component written in React and Next in the front end app, which goes to Vercel or Netlify or any such CDNs, right? I have my Sitecore component wherein in the JSON I am writing the GraphQL query. So basically it is exposing JSON data. Does my front end component code care from where the data is coming, or I mean, does it need to be in a specific format for that component to understand how do I really loop through the sections?
In terms of security or in terms of like?
In terms of just making sure that what data I am passing from CMS, it's visible on the component.
Like
so let's say I'm having a layout service, right? So basically you said it's JSON data. So there has to be some structure. Does that structuring remain same whether it is layout service or GraphQL, or does it change?
It does actually change, because in layout service it will have some particular nodes. From that you will be reading your data. So for example, you will have placeholder inside that layout, under that you will have fields, and then you will be working there.
Okay.
While in GraphQL, when you are reading, you will have your query. In that query you can give some name to it, or otherwise it will directly render. So basically that structure would change. So you have to initially define like which way or what would be your structure, because data would be similar, like you will be getting title and description, but the actual node of that getting would differ, and it will be different for the front-end developers.
Sure. So now if I am writing, so I'm writing a GraphQL query and I'm writing it in CMS, right? Where does that data section come in on the JSON side?
It will be rendered in your layout service itself. When you are using integrated, it will be shown in your layout itself.
Okay.
To get the data.
Sure. And can I fire the GraphQL query from my front-end components?
You can. The another way would be you will be writing your query in the front-end developer, and there you can define like which GraphQL playground over which you want service you wanted to hit. You wanted to get it from the edge, or you wanted to get it from the CM server, depending on the component requirements. That whether it wanted to have published data check or everything, or if you are like checking something you wanted to query inside the CM server, you can go via that way.
Okay. Which one is efficient or which one is better?
Again, efficiency comes, or the better thing we wanted to compare, it will be according to your requirement. So like we have, before building the components, we'll have structure and everything, how it will work and how it is going to show your data or expose your data. So depending on the component, so if I wanted to go for a promo component, I will go via layout service. If there is a component I wanted to read the parent node, inside that I wanted to read children, and from that children I wanted to have a multi-list, and from that multi-list I wanted to get the title field. So there is complexity level. I will go via the GraphQL. So basically, the performance and everything, it would be almost similar, but depending on the complexity and your requirement, you can go with the different components or different ways.
Sure. Now, I think what I'm also thinking about or having a question around is, like I can write my own content resolvers. So should I go the content resolver way or should I go the GraphQL way? Let's say I am like both of them are on CMS base, which is either it is content resolver or either it is an integrated GraphQL.
So in that case, if you wanted to you'll have multiple components which will use your custom content resolver which you will have written. You should go via the content resolver way. But if you wanted to have some data, specific data that you can easily get data via your GraphQL service, you don't need to write the content resolver thing.
Fair point. So I can only invest my effort in content resolvers in case there are multiple components which are going to use kind of a similar structure or things like that.
Or that could not be possible with the GraphQL way.
Are there such scenarios?
Depending on the skills, there would be multiple things that would come in picture. In GraphQL, GraphQL also you will have custom thing. If you wanted to write a node which will query in your GraphQL item and give you the node, you can write that as well. So depending on your skills, if you are more comfortable towards Visual Studio thing, you will go via let me write down a content resolver and we'll get it everything from there itself. But if you wanted to tweak your query thing, or you want to manipulate the query whatever we are getting and then fitting everything in the out of the box way, and then you can go via GraphQL. But basically when we are working, we have to try to use most of the out of the box thing available. If we wanted to tweak some data, like we wanted to increase one field in my one data source, if I wanted to decrease one thing from my data source item, let's tweak in that way so that we can use the out of the box things.
Right. Cool. Well, any last moment things as far as components go?
You'll learn when you start working on it. So
Sure.
Initially for us also it was whether we should go via GraphQL way or the layout, or how should I use. But basically when we started working on it, there were some circumstances where we have to switch. Okay, I can use, I have written the GraphQL, but it is simpler if I just move my multi-list or the children items in the item itself and then select it at multi-list thing, and that would be easier for me. So we have switched to the layout service and used most of the out of the box things.
Cool. Well, so friends, I think that was Meenakshi for us, giving her thoughts around the components that we build in XM Cloud, and what strategy we can utilize or adapt to, and how we can move further in building out headless applications on XM Cloud. So again, Meenakshi, thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's it, guys. Cheers.